We talk often on this podcast about making your podcast more accessible for those who have disabilities. Today, we're talking with Jenna Udenberg all about disability, why it's not a bad word, why it's important for us to be more intentional with the conversations that we're having with people, no matter their able-bodied or disabled-bodied representation, that we as humans are having deep and meaningful conversations that are based on curiosity, based on commonality, and so much more with those around us. This is such an important conversation, especially if you are someone who is looking to approach your podcast with better diversity across the board, and maybe you're not really sure where to start or how to do it. This is going to be the conversation for you. So please join me in welcoming Jenna to the podcast. Welcome to Podcasting Unlocked, the show for purpose-driven podcasters. I'm Alesia Galati, founder of Galati Media, and I'm here to share actionable strategies to help you amplify your message and grow your audience. Hello, Jenna. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. If you could start by telling everyone who you are and what you do.
Hey, Alesia. It's so great to be here. I am Jenna Udenberg. I am the founder of Above and Beyond with You, which is a nonprofit in northern rural Minnesota. And so we focus on making spaces more accessible and more inclusive. I'm a 2020 Bush Fellow and a 2017 Blandon Community Leader. Most recently, a 2025 Shannon Institute Leader, as well as being a former music educator. I coach the Robo-Dweebs, a Lego robotics competitive team that actually has competition in a couple of weeks. I've been a manual wheelchair user for 38 years now, and I have juvenile arthritis since the age of 7. And so I've been in a wheelchair since age 8. Wow. Disability advocate, activist, and accessibility educator, taking my previous 19 years of being a music educator and twisting and turning and adding it to my disabled life and trying to make the world a better place for folks that are alongside of me and folks that are coming behind me, and giving honor and recognition to those that have went before us, that have paved the way for a lot of the different barriers and lived experiences that wouldn't have been possible for me today had they not chosen to do this work as well. So very humbled to be in these spaces and doing this work.
Yeah, I can imagine. Wow. What an incredible story, right? Like, to take something completely out of your control, something that you could just live with and maneuver your life around, but instead using it as a kind of launch pad to support others through their journeys. I commend you. That is incredible work. And I'm sure very impactful work, but also takes a lot of energy and effort and disappointment sometimes, I'm sure. And so just all of your flowers to you for doing that, because that's great work. We've had a few podcast episodes on really being able to be more accessible for our audience to, as not just content creators and podcasters, but as people who move in the world, to maybe shift or adjust the way that we think about people who are different than us. Why is it that you believe that disability is not a bad word?
Yeah, I love this question. So growing up rural, especially in the mid 80s when I was diagnosed, to graduating in 1998 from high school and all the things, disability wasn't even a word then, right? It was handicapped, and it was all these other horrific words that I won't even let off my tongue.
Yeah.
And again, like, I will preface this by saying, especially being a lifelong educator, like in kindergarten, preschool, we teach kids like, hey, this is a red crayon and this is a green crayon and this is a purple crayon. And I had never thought about that, except for a good friend of mine said, when I had my first kid, I was like, wow, the power that I have. Because I could have taught them that purple was brown and green was orange and all the things, right? And so it really made me look at labels in a new and different way, because a lot of folks out there are like, labels are bad. And it's like, yeah, but, right? Or yes, and, depending on how you want to frame it. And so for me, like, and again, for any disabled folks that are listening or people with disabilities, like, I interchange those because I am in culture. And so you'll just hear it going both ways. But any folks that are listening and are in a different place in their journey with their disability might agree or disagree with me. But for a while, I was like, oh, handy capable. That's kind of fun. But now that I'm in advocate hat, I'm like, no, for me, that just sounds infantizing, meaning that it just makes me sound
Mm.
less than. And I've already been treated as less than. I've already been othered for how many decades of my life. I just want to be a proud disabled woman. And the proud word isn't like the arrogant, egotistical, like that negative connotation of that word either. And for me also, it's not that I think that I'm superior within my own community and culture or within non-disabled community and culture. And so I just always like putting that disclaimer out there, right? Because labels and words have power, they have meaning, but until they have shared meaning, you don't really know what that other person is saying or thinking. So society really treats disability by and large as this othered thing, as this thing that shouldn't be talked about, as this thing of, well, you're really under my table because I'm superior to you, and you should be thankful for any scraps in which happen to fall to the floor for you to eat. And that has been a lot of the history, right? Or also the history of disability has been more like, ooh, you're demon possessed, or you're all of these other horrific things that just simply are not true, but trying to fight through those different lived experiences, those different generational things. And so it's not always just fighting the physical barriers, it's fighting the attitudes and the unconscious biases of folks that haven't looked at it. And so early in becoming a disability advocate for and with others, instead of just being my own self advocate, I really had to look at, what do these words mean to me? And what do I align with and what do I not align with? And how can I make this come full circle and be open for all, but yet truly sticking with what I see, right? And so lately, the saying for me is like, I've had so many folks do to me or do for me, but very few have done with me. And so that's a lot of the above and beyond with you, is like, it's not just calling us up and having us help consult about your space or train your employees or train you or whatever, right? It's like, let's make this authentic, organic relationship. So we're not being tokenized anymore. You're not just finding somebody with a mobility disability like myself, or you're not just finding a blind person or a deaf person and then like treating them as like the gospel truth about all things XYZ, right? And the other thing that I really love that's happening in disability community and culture as a saying right now is like, if you would not do it to a non-disabled person, then don't do it to a disabled person. And the flip side of that is, if there's something you are doing for non-disabled people, then you should be doing that also for disabled people. So it's really about, having those relationships. And once you have those relationships, then you're going to see that disability is not a bad word. But there's so many generations alive right now that it was seen that, right? It was the limitation. And until I was teaching in a classroom that wasn't Jenna friendly, is kind of my term for a wheelchair accessible, because it makes it more personable, right? Like, oh, and it also makes it very individual. This might be a Jenna friendly space, but it's not an Alesia friendly space. And that there are similarities and there are differences, and that's okay. But the thing that I learned was that it's not my arthritis that makes me disabled, and it's not my wheelchair that makes me disabled, but it's the physical and attitudinal environments that I get placed in that are creating those barriers, which then make me disabled. So I could teach in one of my district's band rooms, and it was phenomenal because it was all one level. I could move chairs and stands easily. I could play all the percussion instruments. I could be in my office teaching. I could go to my elementary school. Again, one straight flat floor. I could do all the things, run an adaptive music program. And then I went to my other choir classroom in a different school. And because it was built in like the 1950s, it had cement stairs. Well, then I couldn't get to any space in my room. So it wasn't, again, that I was too disabled to teach, because I could thrive and do amazing things in these two spaces. But then you put me in this third space, and now you disabled me more than any of my conditions were. So hopefully that helps listeners understand a little bit more of like, oh, didn't think about it from that aspect, because it was definitely mind-blowing for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. There are a few things that you might have, if you're watching the video, you saw me looking down and making notes as Jenna was talking. The few things that came to mind as you were talking is words have meaning, right? How we address our words. And I'm a parent.
Mm.
So I was talking to my 11-year-old about this recently. He was like, I was asking him if he knew the difference between fiction and nonfiction because we homeschool. So we were talking about the differences, and he was like, well, fiction is fake, nonfiction is not fake. And I'm like, that's a great start.
Right.
When we think about the words that we use, while fiction is not based on real life events, there could be elements that are based on someone's lived experience. It's important that it doesn't matter if it's nonfiction or it's fiction, we can learn about ourselves. It can be a window out to the world that is around us, or it can be a mirror reflecting back our own experiences. And so, yes, you're technically correct, but the words that we use have meaning. And so it's important that we go a little bit deeper with how we talk about these things. So I love that you mentioned that. And then one thing you mentioned was how, like, I know for you, your disability is visible, right? For someone who is, I mean, not on this camera, but
Right.
for someone who sees you for real life, as my kids like to say. I'm someone who has a chronic illness. I have interstitial cystitis, which pretty much just means that there are potholes in my bladder and the nerves are exposed in my bladder. And so I have to be careful what I eat. I'm one of the very few people that does not have debilitating pain constantly because of this condition. And it happened after I had one of my kids. So like didn't have it before, and then it kind of just developed, and I will have it for the rest of my life. That is something that if someone were to look at me, they would not be able to see my chronic illness. I wouldn't personally consider it a disability, but there are disabilities where you look at someone like arthritis, right? They might be wearing a wrist brace and you think, oh, maybe they, sprained it a little bit, or maybe they sit at a computer and type too much, but you might not be thinking this person has arthritis or this person has potentially debilitating pain that can impact their livelihood and how they feel in their life. And so we, I think, have to, and this is what I love what you said, the way that you would treat someone who is able-bodied would be the same way that you treat someone who is disabled, that it's no different across the board, that you give them the same respect that you would, because at the end of the day, we are all human beings and we are all deserving of love and respect from the people around us. And so I think that was just something that came to mind as you were talking about that, of like, even people who their illnesses or their disabilities might not be visible. We don't know what someone is going through, right? And so having that same respect for them. And how I'm part of marginalized communities just as a person. I am Afro-Latina, I'm queer. This just puts me in marginalized communities. And I know disabled is also a marginalized community. And how you mentioned that so many of the things that you have to come up against are systemic, that they are issues that we do have to address as a society to make life better for everyone, right? And so I think that that's something that's really important to note. And you mentioned doing things with. Can we go a little bit deeper on the doing with? What does that look like as someone who's just moving? Maybe they want to make a bigger impact with their podcast, or they want to, with the content that they're talking about, or they want to interview the right types of people that do have the marginalized identities, right? Or they're trying to just be more inclusive with the things that they're saying or doing. What are some ways that we can, without tokenizing, work with marginalized communities and specifically disabled folks?
First of all, thanks for your vulnerability and sharing all of your background and all the ways that you find yourself in this world. So thank you for that, because when we're on this platform, we don't really have to, right? So I appreciate that. Yeah, what a great question, right? Like, I think I'm going to come at it maybe from a different vantage point in some ways, but the biggest thing is like, where do we find our commonalities? And what is the impetus for this question? Like, not you, but like somebody out in the world, right? Having this question. And is it just for your own personal gain? Is it just for your own personal curiosity? And would you yourself feel comfortable asking that question? Because if that answer of the other person doesn't change an access need that you're meeting, if it doesn't change how you show up for this person or how they need to show up for you, then what does it matter? Is it just because you want to know this thing about Alesia or Jenna so you can go and gossip at the coffee shop? Yuck. But really, like, we're all human. We're all failed folks, right? So let's just own it. And sometimes we just get to have those weird conversations, right? Because once we all let our walls down, we can just like, all right, awesome. Let's talk about being marginalized, right? And we'd have a completely different conversation, probably not being recorded, right?
Right.
But I think it's just really like, it comes back to the golden rule of treating others how you want to be treated. And yet I also want to add the caveat of like, if you've never been othered or you've never been other because of situations or identities like that, because it's just not your wheelhouse, it's not your lived experience, then you do have to show grace and you do have to show respect and you do have to be okay with the fact and actually state, like, be explicit about the implicit, which is what I just heard from someone else. So I'm not claiming that one, but it just really spoke to me recently because it's like, for instance, if I wanted to know something about you, like, if it's okay for me to ask this and it's okay for you not to answer, what is it like to XYZ? Because we live a different shared life, right? Like, what is that like? And again, but then being honest with yourself before you ask that question of like, if Alicia's like, you don't get to ask that, like, I got to be okay with that and then still continue this conversation.
Right.
So it's preparing yourself and also finding trusted folks, right? Like, be like, all right, Alesia, let's meet offline. Let's have our coffee at the same time. And like, let's ask each other weird, curious questions to just have that safe space to talk about the elephant in the room or to talk about difference, because we don't do that as a society. And then now we can see why we're such a hot mess because we haven't been shown and there's not a lot of role models out there. And the few that there are, I'm always just like, can I just sit and listen? I don't want to be an eavesdropper or a gossiper. I just literally want to like watch how some of these very just true, real deal folks have conversation in community. And it doesn't matter what of those taboo topics come up, at least on the outside, they're looking like they're fully engaged and they're in it and they're being respectful and they're showing grace and they're just exuding like love and safety and care. And who knows what's going on behind that, right? Until you can have some of those deeper questions. But I think it just starts with awareness. It starts with finding those authentic relationships where you can have those uncomfortable conversations. And there's a great book about that. I think it's called Difficult Conversations. Finding a life coach that knows that book. That's what I did with part of my fellowship funds from the Bush Foundation. So really just investing in yourself. Like, we're all leaders. So let's invest in ourselves to figure out like, where are our blind spots? Because every strength also brings an opportunity for continued growth, as well as what we would call a weakness, right? Because we always want that good and bad, but some things aren't inherently good and inherently bad. Sometimes they just are, and they cause other things, other weaknesses, other opportunities, places for growth. So I think it's just being honest with yourself and honest with others.
I love that you mentioned being okay with the person saying, actually, I don't want to go that deep in this conversation. One of the things, and we met on Podmatch, so it's a little different in that space, but one of the things on my outside of Podmatch intake form for my podcast is consent-based. And I did this after, you guys can go back and listen to the episode with May Kay Sang. We'll have the episode linked in the show notes where she talks about consent in podcasting. And so I have this question that she offered us to put wherever we want, and I love it. And that is there anything that you are not comfortable with talking about on this podcast episode? And I have actually found that some of the responses to that, especially on my more hobby for funsies podcast, are really interesting. So some people will say, actually, I can't talk about politics because of my job, right? Or maybe I interview authors, specifically mostly smutty romance authors. Okay. The podcast is called We Read Smut. It's exactly what it sounds like. And so one of the responses was, I don't want to talk about my sex life. And I was like, I feel like that's an obvious one. Right?
But
I'm not going to ask those questions. That's extremely personal.
Mhm.
But her continued response to that statement was like, I don't want to talk about my sex life. You'd be surprised how many times this comes up. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Okay.
I would say, obviously, for that
Whoa, this is
response, it had to happen a couple times in the algorithm to be like, "Yes, do not. Don't go there."
right. And so I thought that was so interesting, but I think that it's such a great way for us as we're planning these conversations, as we're navigating the humanness of interactions, that we don't do harm
Right.
to the people that we're trying to have these conversations with to facilitate to our communities. And I love what you said towards the beginning of your response to my question was that finding those commonalities, what are those things that we have that are similar that we can bond over and then go a little bit deeper, right? Because I think that it really does build that, okay, I feel like I know you a little bit, I trust you a little bit. And that's why I think that while I don't have to be vulnerable in these spaces, I think that it makes such a bigger difference on the depth of the conversation that I would prefer to have. I'm not someone that can do surface level. I'm like, all right, that was boring and a waste of my time. We only talked about the weather. Oh God, why do I go out in public?
Right.
So
Yeah, you go home and you're like,
I want
"I
to go
feel so
deep.
empty." Like, what is yeah, you and I are very similar in that aspect. I'm just like, "Yeah, so today, what was your biggest barrier in life?" And they're like, "The weather. It was rainy."
Right?
And I was just like, "Oh, okay. Well, maybe next time."
Oh man.
But it does take a level of bravery and courage to put ourselves out there continually and then have that bag of questions, right? To be like,
Right.
how can I go fishing and throw out that little piece
Mm.
of bait to be like, are you one of my people? Are you a safe person? Are you these
Right.
things? What's going on
Yeah.
behind that wonderful smile? Is it true joy or is it like, I'm going to eat you alive next session? You just never know because I've had that experience, especially as an educator. Like, oh, good, we're singing today. And then it's like, ooh, meltdown city. Okay, somehow I triggered something
Right.
somewhere.
Yeah.
And it's all good because we all show up in different ways, and how we show up changes moment by moment and word by word and emotion by emotion. And that's called humanity.
Right. It's so true. But yeah, I think finding those commonalities can be so important. And you mentioned like getting community, being in community. And I think that as creators in this space, podcasters, content creators, business owners, that it's important that while we are in community, that we also find community spaces outside of where we tend to hang out, because I feel like, especially I've been in the online space for over 10 years now, and I think back to like the initial spaces that I was in, and I liken it to, as I was a new mom at the time, the mommy Facebook groups, where it was like it's just a circle of complaining and spiraling and, quite frankly, a lot of depression, right? Which is that space, understand, but that shouldn't be the only space that you are maybe navigating or processing the feelings of new motherhood. Maybe you need a safe space in a group chat with some friends or some other new moms who are not in those spaces. Maybe you enjoy reading, and so finding spaces in whatever genre of books that you like, that you have something outside of just that one space to kind of balance you out, but also get you in front of new people that were not. I see this often. People are like, it's so hard to find diversity in, and I'm using diversity in a general race, background, abilities, etc., right? It's so hard to find diversity in my guests. And it's like, you're not in the right spaces.
Right.
That's what it is. And the algorithm is going to keep pushing the same types of people that you keep saying yes to, or you keep stopping on their content or liking their content. And I think that we, yes, be in community and get like pull from the people in the shared experience while also getting outside of our comfort zone. And I know it is so freaking scary and very terrifying.
Right.
Like, it's something that I'm pushing myself to do more of, and I'm terrified a little bit. It's low stakes, right? I'm joining a book club, and I don't tend to read what people tell me to read because I'm a mood reader. So, like, it's very low stakes for me. It's just a book club. But it's something I've been thinking of, like, what is that one thing that I could do to get outside of my comfort zone?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it is low stakes. Maybe I reach out to someone who I have seen on social media that I'm like, I don't know what kind of conversation we could have, but let's see. Maybe explore it with some curiosity, right? I feel like we could do so much better as people who facilitate these conversations to show up better for humanity as a whole rather than just the world that we see
Right.
in our little circles.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think I'm like a year and a half into being a podcast guest, but it's very interesting, telling, whatever the right word might be, is like a lot of the responses I get are like, oh, I just had a disabled guest on. Circle back in
Whoa.
like 3 years or circle back next year. And I'm like, but we all come with different lived experiences. And so, right, I appreciate your reaction. So it's not just me. Thanks for the validation. Because I was like, really? But like, this was a business person and I'm not a business person. Or this was, a paraplegic and I'm not a paraplegic. Like,
Right.
all of our stories are so different and the work that we do is so different. But I've seen that multiple times. And I'm like, well, that kind of shows me the heart of the show or the heart of the host.
Oh my gosh. I'm so extremely sorry that you had to go through that and that people are like that. So we're not going to do that, listeners, right? Not at all what we're going to do.
So I just appreciate the growth mindset that you're sharing, right? Like, and like we've said multiple times, like just those curious questions, because we're never going to live everyone's life. Like, no matter what your belief system is, right? Like, we're not going to come back 7.9 billion times. And even if people did, you're not on planet Earth at that moment with other lived beings. We're never going to learn all these things. And as much as I'm sure you're going to experience in the coming years with your 11-year-old as they enter teenagehood, like, but
Yes.
I already know it all, Mom. And it's like, well,
Oh my God.
no, you don't. And you don't have enough breaths on this earth to live it all, right? So try to learn from others. And I think that's my thing when you're talking about mothers too. It's like, and this could be in any aspect, but like, how do we reach up as the younger generation to the older generation to have those mentors, to have those aunties, to have those XYZ motherly type figures, fatherly like figures? And how simultaneously do we reach down a generation or two to be what we needed, to be what we need? And there's just so many gaps in so much of what I see, not just in disability realm, not just in the spiritual realm, but in all of life, right? Like, at one of the trainings I was in several years ago now, it was like the American model of how we live life just isn't in community. Like, we all go to the grocery store, but we all go to the grocery store separately. Well, with those young moms, like, why aren't there older women that are like, hey, you want to go grocery shopping every Tuesday at 10 a.m.? Awesome. I'm a retiree. I'm going to put that in. So if your kid is crying and I need to like throw him on my lap and entertain him while you get to grocery shop, like, why aren't we living life together, right? Doing laundry. They used to all go down to the stream and they're all together and all doing life. But in our world, it's like, oh, sorry, Alesia, I can't meet with you for like 3.5 months because my schedule's too busy. So hopefully you're doing okay, but I'll see you in 3.5 months. And it's like, that isn't community. That isn't sharing life.
Yeah, it's so true. And I saw someone post about that where they're like, the context was they had an aunt who had walked out of the family, just one day left the kids and left everyone and never came back. And she was like, as a younger person, I was like, how dare she do that? What is happening? And now that I am a mom, I can understand because there is that. And then I was like, oh my God, this is making me feel too much right now for 5:00 in the morning. But the comments, one, were just so incredibly uplifting of like, I see you, I hear you, You're not alone. You are not feeling that alone. A lot of us have felt that feeling. Here's what helps us stay. Here's how we get community, right? But a lot of the statements were that we need more of that. The world we live in does not help facilitate getting people into community, instead separating them. A bit of divisiveness in the world and all of that. One thing that you mentioned, it just kind of came back to me as we were talking about this, was how you said, hey, this person, had a disabled person on their podcast recently, so they're going to circle back to you in X amount of time. And how you said, well, I'm different. I have a unique experience. And I have a friend, she uses this phrase and I love it so much. When you meet an autistic person, you've met one autistic person. And I think that the same goes for disabled folks or people in certain lived experiences, that we do not all have the same exact experience. That if you've met one disabled person, you have literally met one, and that is it. Their experience is so uniquely them. Their disability is so uniquely them. When they started having the disability, is like all of the layers to it are so uniquely them. You can have different conversations with each and every one, and you will get something. Maybe there'll be a through line that you can always reference back, right? Like as content creators, we should do better with that.
Right.
But like, you can still have really impactful and incredible conversations. And it also made me think of, I can never remember this dude's podcast. I've literally only seen clips of him on Facebook, and that is it. But I know he has a podcast. And he was talking to someone about how different he is from his sister. And the guest was like, well, of course, you are a dude and your sister is a woman. Like, your parents, societally, expectationally, etc., have set different standards and parented you each very differently. And you add in the fact that you guys are X amount of years apart. Your parents were different people when they became parents to you versus became parents to your sister. Also, you have to take into consideration the kid's temperament. I mean, anyone who has more than one kid knows the first kid, like, don't judge me on the behavior of the second kid. Judge me on the behavior of the first kid, because I don't know what in the world happened with the second one. He's a feral little gremlin. I love him so much. So, like, their temperaments are completely different. The one is like, let's throw hands, and the other one's like, I'm feeling big feelings and I'm going to cry today, and that's okay, right? Like, and so we have to parent very differently. Everyone's lived experience is so uniquely them. I think this kind of wraps up this so beautifully of how do we approach the conversations that we have with other human beings with a sense of respect for who they are as human beings, with a sense of curiosity in getting to know them and their lived experience, while also being vulnerable ourselves and being open to sharing, and not being someone who is rude, like the people who talked to you about, oh, well, we already had a disabled person. Let's do better. Let's be better. Even if you take nothing from this conversation, if you're just like, well, whatever, you shouldn't be. But how can you create more community with the people that are around you in any way? One person, how can you check on them and make sure that they're doing okay today? Maybe it's a new mom. Maybe it is a friend from college that you haven't talked to in forever. Maybe it's a past podcast guest that's just been on your mind. How can we reconnect with people, create community, love their humanness for all that it is? All of that. Jenna, this has been so incredible. If you could leave our audience with one thing to do from this conversation, what would it be?
Oh boy. Well, this has been on my heart the whole time we've been talking. So I'm going to give you my visual description for your friends that are tuning in on the video. So I am a middle-aged woman with light brown hair that is short. I have turquoise headphones on that keep disappearing into the background of a very cool library looking lots of books. And I'm wearing a white t-shirt that has above and beyond in maroon lettering. and with you in blue with a moving forward wheelchair icon with a person moving forward in their chair. And I'm coming to you with a manual wheelchair, even though you can't see that, but you see me rocking from time to time because I'm popped up in a wheelie. And so I think the more that we can bring inclusiveness to it, whether it's giving visual descriptions, whether it is providing alt text in all of our online spaces, which is something I'm trying to do, like full transparency, like just because I founded a nonprofit based on accessibility and inclusion, I'm learning something new every day. And there's new things that I need grace for as I transition and try to become more inclusive and more welcoming. And I think the biggest thing from today for listeners is just how do you want to move through this world and what impact do you want to leave? Because it's not, I mean, yes, words are important, don't get me wrong. It's how you make people feel that they're going to remember. So if you're truly a safe, welcome person who truly has care and love and acceptance and understanding, then let that show and let all the other insecurities and the worries fall away. Because a lot of times when we're worried or insecure, we say a lot of stupid stuff.
Right.
So it's like, just lay it out there at the beginning of the coffee time, right? Like, I'm really sorry, Alicia. I'm going to say a lot of stupid stuff. Call me on my crap because I don't want to continue. I want to be a better human after our time together than I was wheeling into this space. So let's start at that space. And then we're not just talking about the weather or the latest football game or trivial things that aren't going to matter a year from now. But we're going to remember this conversation because of XYZ, because we went deep, because you asked this one question or I asked you this one question.
Yes. And thank you for giving that visual description. I always forget, even though I had someone on to talk about giving the visual descriptions, I always forget to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do mine while we're here. I am an Afro-Latina brown person. I would say lighter brown person. I have curly hair. It is up today, so that's nice. Black headphones. I'm wearing my black comfort sweatshirt. You've probably seen the TikTok ads or heard of them. Honestly, worth every penny for anyone who's curious. I love my comfort sweatpants and sweatshirt. And I have a bookshelf behind me with lots of diverse romance books because I like to read diverse romance. And so that is me. And there's some floral and a lot of Lego. Love Lego for the bookshelves. And so, Jenna, thank you so much for being on the podcast and being vulnerable with us and sharing the things that we can do to be better human beings in this world. I appreciate you so much. So if people are interested in connecting with you, getting to know you further, where can they go to do all of that?
Yeah, best places are aboveandbeyondwithyou.org is our website, and the U is a capital U, like my last name, because kindergartners couldn't say Udenberg. You can also find us on social media. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Again, Above and Beyond with You is our handle in all those spaces. And then if you're looking to read my memoir and know more of the dirty secrets, and maybe not so dirty, but thought-provoking, life-changing stories, you can check out my book Within My Spokes, and you can buy it wherever you buy your books, including Amazon. And there's also a link on our website to purchase that as well. And all proceeds go to furthering the work of the nonprofit. So thank you in advance for taking us out for a spin. And if you're looking for consulting or training or any of those ways of connecting, we want to be on that journey with you, not doing it for you, but doing it with you.
Awesome. And we'll have links for all of that in the show notes. Definitely go check out everything Jenna has to offer. Thank you so much.
Thank you.